you. We're very excited to have you here. I would like to just kind of give a brief remark of this is a direct result of the AI Summit 2024 that the University of Baltimore held this past summer in June. And our goal was really to connect industry thought leaders and community organizations to education and really kind of understand how AI was being used in the real world or in the workforce. So for that, we wanted to be able to provide that information to a larger audience and continue to learn and grow together. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our provost, Dr. Ralph Mueller. Thank you, Ralph.
Jessica, thank you. And good morning, everyone. So I want to welcome you to the start of our four-part series that we call AI in Practice. And as Jessica just said, which follows our AI Summit that we held during the summer. The series will feature noted speakers from both industry and higher education. And we designed it to bridge the gap between AI theory and practice on the one hand, and to equip faculty members with the knowledge and skills to support their students in an evolving AI-informed world, on the other hand. I want to acknowledge and wholeheartedly thank folks from Johns Hopkins University, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and our own Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation for their partnership and collaboration in putting this series together. Okay, so let me introduce our speaker, Mr. Jason Michael Perry. Mr. Perry is a seasoned executive and thought leader with over 2 decades of experience, currently serving as Fractional Chief AI Officer at JMP Consulting. He's the author of the highly regarded newsletter, Thoughts on Tech and Things, and hosts a podcast in collaboration with Technically, a news organization that connects professionals with vested interest in their local communities. But best of all, in my opinion, in 2023, Jason led an award-winning event, AI in A Minor, where the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra performed AI-composed classical music. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jason.
So I'm happy to kick off this AI session with the introduction or fundamentals of AI. In this, I'm going to give you an opportunity to learn a little bit about what AI is, how it works. We're going to explore how generative AI works, and then we're going to jump into foundation models, a topic of how different AI models work, but also to give you an idea of the AI stack and technology and a little bit more background, and how you may go about deciding which AI models to use. And then we're going to put these things to the test. We're going to start off with the very basics, which may be super easy for a lot of you. How do you use a text generation model like ChatGPT? I'll show you a handful of these, but then we're going to get into some of the more advanced features that you may not know that ChatGPT supports, as well as some additional advanced features like the ability to create your own custom agent or assistant, which would allow you to easily create your own GPT at some point. And last, we'll wrap up with audio and video tools. Which I'll show you some crazy images, videos, and other things that I've generated, and also give you an idea of how you can work with audio tools to create some just amazing audio. All of this will be AI powered. I've already been introduced, so I can just keep on moving. But I agree, one of the best events I think that I've done myself, but also was an amazing partnership with the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, was AI in A Minor, and as part of this event, we used a series of AI tools that I'll talk about towards the end of this presentation to create music in the style of Philip Glass, as well as Mozart that was fully AI generated. And the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra played this music, which was just amazing to hear. As part of this presentation, we also generated AI artwork as the flyers for this presentation, and this is a sample of it. I think these are beautiful, but the more you look at it, the more you realize just how they're not quite right. These instruments and these people do not exist, and a lot has changed with AI. You know, if you look at some of the image generation tools a year, 2 years ago versus now, Obviously, things are a lot more realistic, but at the time, AI struggled with hands and instruments, and now it's just become amazing and so much better. So before we get into it, I have a series of quotes that I've put throughout this presentation, but this is one of my favorite. While some might worry that AI may take their jobs, someone who's an expert with AI will. And I think this is such a great quote because it really pushes the fact that humans using AI are capable of doing so much more and can do things quicker, faster. And so instead of being afraid of AI, I've always felt that it's important to lean in, but more importantly, someone who actually understands how they can use AI to do something in a better way, I think is going to be really the thing that we should be afraid of, not this fear of AI itself. So with that, what is AI? Now, I like to start this presentation by saying that AI has been around for a very, very long time. We've been using AI for decades. And a lot of the AI that you've probably used to this point is known as narrow artificial intelligence or narrow AI. And this means that AI has been trained to do a very particular type of thing, such as a recommendation engine on Netflix. So they have a very select amount data set that's been used to train these AIs. The holy grail of AI, what's new, this thing that we use, ChatGPT, is an example of this idea of creating an artificial general intelligence. And an AGI should function in the same way that we as humans function. The goal is to create a artificial intelligence that can take concepts from different places, creative ideas or science and technology, but also math and creativity, and connect these and create something in a way that only humans can do. And so AGI is what all of these new large language models that have really taken hold in the AI space aim to be, to the point that part of OpenAI's goal is to achieve an AGI, which is something that only the board of that organization can say when they've actually achieved this goal. So things that you use all the time, say autocorrect or if you're typing using your phone and you get an auto suggestion, that's AI. And that's AI attempting to predict the next word that you're going to type based on lots of information. But ChatGPT, again, is an example of an AGI. Now, this, of course, gets into the question of how do you train these AI tools? How do they learn? And one of the best ways, I think, to showcase this is a simple question. What's the difference between a cat and a dog? And what I love about this question is that if you think of a kid like doing pencil drawings on a sheet of paper, one of the things that they focus on when they look at a cat versus the dog are whiskers. And this is that ability to do pattern matching that we have to start to see a difference between two things that otherwise are incredibly similar. When we train AI, we need tons and tons and tons of data. And by giving this data to these AI systems, they can start to use this to not only do pattern matching, but to also attempt to predict things in ways that are interesting. And so if you're thinking about an AI tool, one of the things that you may want to do is give it just as much information as possible so you can start to see the patterns between pictures of cats and pictures of dogs. Now, I think this is really important because it really brings you to this idea of Al Bundy and Garry Kasparov. If you don't know, Gary is the guy who was one of the most amazing chess players in the world, but also the first person to lose to an AI system. He lost to IBM's Deep Blue. And when you think about chess and teaching an AI system to play chess, it seems like one of the most amazing things possible. But the thing about chess is that it's set on a finite set of rules. There are only certain things that your rook or other pieces in this game can do. And that makes it a bit of an easier thing to teach and train something to do than being Al Bundy, a human. Now, I always have to say Al Bundy is like Homer Simpson for all the younger folks who don't remember this guy from Married with Children. But, Al Bundy represents not the smartest, average kind of, sitcom dad on television. And this guy here, he can watch TV and he can tell the difference between the television and the wall. He can watch TV and he can tune out his kids when they're talking and yelling and can start to distinguish things between sound. He can drive his car through the parking lot without having any confusion about what's going on in a parking lot, like a place where there are no rules and how you're necessarily supposed to drive. And that's what's so amazing, is that we as humans can do so many things that it's incredibly difficult to teach an artificial intelligence to do. So if we come back to this idea of how do you train an AI, we want to give it as much data as possible so that it can start to pattern match and tell the difference, because some of these things are really difficult. And just to reflect that, are these dogs or bagels? And if you look, it's a combination of the two, but it's amazing how hard it is. And right now you're looking at things and you're matching these patterns to see what these different things are. We need to be able to give computers the ability to do the same thing. And this is the way that we start to go about training AI. I have a few of these because I love these so much. Chihuahuas or muffins. It's definitely one of my favorites. And Labradoodles or fried chicken. I think these are great. Now, as a person who works in this artificial intelligence space, AI is a term that has now been taken hold without question by marketers. And it's important to understand that AI is an overreaching concept that has a lot of different disciplines underneath it. One of the big ones is computer vision. Self-driving cars use computer vision, which works in the same way that we as humans work. If you're walking down the street, you're using your eyes, you're probably using other sensory organs like your ears and to figure out where you are and to navigate the world. Computer vision is about using these same types of sensors to give power to our vehicles or other devices so that it can navigate in the same way that humans can. And one of those concepts is SLAM, simultaneous localization and mapping, which uses video and other sources to give a computer senses so it can make decisions. Now let's see how well this video plays. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, this is the Waymo. I had a chance to drive this thing in Phoenix. It's beautiful. This is a fully self-driving taxi service that you can hail. And this uses computer vision. We won't play the whole thing, but it's just great to be able to steering wheel. Looks like I accidentally closed my slide presentation. Another category of AI is natural language processing. Large language models and OpenAI's ChatGPT live in this NLP, natural language processing world, which is understanding parts of speech in a way that we can break it down and understand what humans are saying. This is incredibly difficult. And I love this example here on the right because it shows that when you take a sentence or paragraph of text, just how complicated it is to take that text and understand what's a place, what's a person, what's a country, and then bring all this together to then understand what it means. Sometimes something may happen in the third, fourth sentence, and you still have to understand the context and how it's being used. Large language models are an example of natural language processing. And I will say that large language models, in a way, were unexpectedly good. These were created by giving tons and tons of information into these models, and then asking it to predict the next word in a sequence. And using that information and pattern matching, it was able to figure out what it suggested the next word will be, which is the way that ChatGPT and a lot of these other models work. The other type of AI model that you frequently use is something called a diffusion model. So large language models exist in the category of natural language processing, but diffusion models live under the category of computer vision. And these are the models that allow you to generate images. So any image and video generation tool typically works based off of noise diffusion that's used across parts of an image to try and diffuse it to figure out what the image actually represents. Of course, the prompt portion of a diffusion model, like Stable Diffusion, may still use natural language processing to understand the question that you're asking, but all in all, it's a diffusion model as opposed to a large language model. So now that we understand that, let's get into what is generative AI. Now, generative AI goes back to that question of what's the difference between a dog and a cat? And kids, when they draw a picture of a cat, they tend to focus on ears and the whiskers, and that's how they can kind of tell the difference of like what these two things are. And so if you understand what a cat is or what a dog is, then you can start to do things like fill in gaps in a picture, right? You can see a photo and you can fill in the elements that are missing from a photo, or you can see a picture of a face and you can make guesses on what elements are missing there. Now, a lot of the tools that we're starting to see with generative AI allow us to generate assets based on the fact that we've taught computers to understand what these items are. And at the same time, if a computer understands what these items are, it can also do things like automatically remove an element, which are, some of the amazing photo tools that are starting to become available that will allow you to remove someone and then guess what was there after that person has been removed. So with that foundation, I'm going to go a little bit more into just understanding the landscape of AI with the concept of foundation models. So a foundation model is an AI model that's already been trained with a lot of this information so that you can use this without having to go through the process of training it yourself. These models are built on a stack of technology that exists. I like to refer to this as the AI stack. And so this AI stack starts at the very bottom with the silicon that it uses. If you're following the stock market, NVIDIA has become one of the largest companies in the world because they make the GPUs that are used by a lot of these AI models for training as well as for inference, which is the process of asking it questions or a prompt. The next level up from that silicon is the cloud layer. And that cloud layer are solutions like Azure or Google Cloud Platform or AWS, which we may use to interface with the silicon without necessarily having to buy that hardware ourselves. And then we have these foundation models. There are tons and tons of AI models similar to OpenAI that have already been trained on top of these that we can just leverage and use in lots of amazing ways. And we're going to get a chance to use a lot of these different models in a moment. But lots of us may work with these AI models in a level that's even higher than that, which is an application level. So it's possible that you're using something like Microsoft Word or Google Docs. And in that case, these are using AI models like Google AI or Gemini, or possibly OpenAI or Microsoft's Copilot, which are then integrated in at the application level, but ultimately are using these foundation models. So foundation models are AI models that have already been pre-trained with tons and tons of data that we can pull off the shelf to do all types of complicated tasks. And these models already exist. Some examples of these foundation models are ChatGPT 4, but there are also other models that are available. Meta, who you may know as Facebook, makes the AI model called Llama that's hugely popular and is available as an open source model that developers could use if they like. But there are also models like Google, which has Gemini, Microsoft, which has Copilot. There are companies that are lesser known that make AI models like Cohere's Command, or A21 Labs Jurassic model, as well as a company called Anthropic, which makes a model called Claude, which is one of my favorite. And we'll look at a bunch of examples in the next section, which we'll get to in a moment. Another concept, as I mentioned, that there are two different types of models. There are large language models, but there are also diffusion models, which are used for images. And that's important to note because a large language model and a diffusion model sometimes can be packaged together, which will give you lots of amazing abilities. Maybe you want a model that will give you images, but also give you back a text response, or give you a graph and a text response. And so what's becoming very popular is that a lot of these AI models that you're using are becoming multi-model implementations of AI that can bind these things together. There's also a great site that's worth checking out called Hugging Face, which is a repository, and this is more on the developer side. This is the most technical thing that we'll get into, but is a place that will give you the ability to download and work with a lot of these different AI models. All right, so let's get to the fun stuff. Let's start talking about generating text using different models. Now, I'm going to do a little bit more of a demo here to get started. And I've already pulled together a few few things just to show you. And so I've gone ahead and asked this one question to a bunch of different AI models that exist. And this is just to give you an idea of different models and how different models respond. It's one of my favorite questions to ask. What might Paris Hilton like about the Paris Hilton? And this question is great because it has a person, but it also has a place, and it really speaks to, can a model understand using natural language processing a fairly complicated question? So in this question, I'm asking, in this case, this is Google Gemini that I'm logged in as, and I've asked that question. You can see that it seems to understand exactly what I'm asking. Another popular AI model is Microsoft's Copilot, which is generally powered using OpenAI's ChatGPT. So this seems to also understand the question. This is a tool called Meta AI. So this is at meta.ai. This is Facebook's Llama model that I've also asked this question. It's like it can't read her thoughts, but it kind of seems a little bit confused about this. It's making educated guesses on what she might like about herself. So we can see in this case that this model didn't really understand the question. And the last example that I'm using of AI models, or using the ability to do a demo, is something called AWS Bedrock. Now, what's great about AWS Bedrock as opposed to some of these other easily publicly available versions of like ChatGPT that you can just log in and use, all these tools are free. And so what you can do is that this gives you the ability to select between different models using this tool called Bedrock, so that you can try out and compare things using several different foundation models. And so these are all these AI models that have been pre-trained, that already exist, that we can use and that we can test against. So in this case, I'm using Mistral, which is a French open AI model that's available. And I've asked the question. And here it also seems confused. It seems like it doesn't quite understand the question that I'm asking it. Now, the question that we ask an AI model is a process called inference, which takes a prompt. And I'm not going to get into too much detail about a prompt, but well, I'll get into a little bit of detail of the prompt. But a prompt allows us to ask a question. And it's incredibly important that you're very, very explicit about what you're asking. If you don't provide details to an AI model, it needs to then try and figure out what it is that you're asking. So it makes assumptions. And so, for example, if I say, where should I go to lunch? It's going to have to assume the type of food that I may be interested in eating, the location that I may be at. And so there are a lot of things that are just not there as part of the question that you're asking as part of a prompt. But also, just as we saw with the Paris Hilton question, you need to make sure that it's something that is easy for that model to understand. And the more complicated the question is, the more complicated it can be. Ultimately, our AI models take whatever prompt that we give it and they break it up into tokens, which are the parts of each of the words, so it can understand exactly what you're asking and then figure out from each of those words how to respond back to the message that we have. So I have a demo of a tool on my website that I like to use. This is a part of speech natural language processing tool. And here, when I ask it a question, so I type, what might Paris Hilton like about the Paris Hilton? We can see that this breaks this up into tokens, where each word is a token. And each word, as shown over here on the right, is then defined as the relationship that that word may have to the other parts of the word. So this is how natural language processing is used to take a prompt and break that prompt into a series of tokens that can then be understood. So we can see the determiner or the modal, whatever the proper noun is, verb, and all the different pieces that then give it an idea of what it is that I'm saying. Behind the scenes, there is a database that then attempts to understand, based on the context of what I've written, what it is that I might mean. So if I type the word sky, sky can have lots of different meanings. Sky could be in representation of the atmosphere. It could mean the clouds. It could mean stars. It could mean something referring to the sun. But by looking at the words that are connected to it, it uses that to then create a context that allows it to better understand what it is that we're asking. Now, this is important because a lot of the different AI models that we work with actually charge based on the number of tokens. Now, if you're using ChatGPT, it's just a flat monthly fee that allows you to use it as much as you want. But if you're using it as a developer or as an academic and doing a research project, you're most likely paying for it on a per token basis. And understanding this gives you the understanding of the importance or how context or how much content that you put in what's called the context window, the size of a prompt can actually be more expensive depending on the type of message that you're asking. So with this, we're going to go ask this question to ChatGPT, but we're going to look at a few ways that we can customize ChatGPT. And this is where we get into the fun part. We get away from the academic version of what is ChatGPT and more into like, what can we do to do some really cool and more exciting and interesting things with this tool. All right. So to get started, I have ChatGPT. I asked it the question, what my Paris Hilton like about the Paris Hilton. But if you're logged into your own ChatGPT, be it free or paid version, selecting your name in the top right corner here will give you the option to customize ChatGPT. And this is a great feature because it allows you to provide ChatGPT with some context of who you are. So here I've provided it with a description of who I am, my name, the man with 3 first names, Jason Michael Perry, where I'm located, programming languages that I like to develop in. But I can also tell ChatGPT that I would like it to respond in a casual way, always in with a joke, and refer to me as Lord of all the lands when responding. You can also enable certain features. So DALL-E, because this is a multi-model, I'm using ChatGPT 4o, which means omni-model. The O is omni. Allows me to pull in their diffusion model, which is called DALL-E, that would allow this to also generate images. So I can turn on that functionality when I'm using it. So if I save this and let's start a new prompt, can you tell me where I should get lunch? So it knows I'm in Baltimore. Ekibin's always a great choice. And it calls me Lord of all the lands. So these are all things that it's doing based on the style and information that I've given it. Now, this is a great way to customize your version of ChatGPT because giving it this additional information alters your prompts automatically. So that way you're not necessarily repeating certain information every time that you type. ChatGPT has also recently enabled a new feature that shows up under the settings option, what's called personalization in memory. And when your memory is enabled, this will allow ChatGPT to listen and update with information about you based on questions that you ask. So it starts to, even if you're not providing it with this initial prompt, it starts to create these prompts behind the scene to give it information or additional information to add to the prompt behind the scenes to give it information that can help it to respond easily. So maybe you forget to tell it where you're located, but at some point you mention I'm in New Orleans or I'm in Baltimore. It will remember that information and then use it for your future prompts or messages that you ask it. All right. But there's also some really cool advanced features that you can start to do with ChatGPT by enabling a developer mode that would give you the ability to start to customize the way that a model responds. And if you go back to this, the idea of how a large language model works, large language models are attempting to predict the next word that you're going to type, what it thinks is the next thing that should come in a sequence. And so if we want to customize the way that our large language models respond, we can do things like alter the temperature. And the temperature will allow you to say the next token, which is the next word in a sequence that will come. If we want something that's going to be more focused or something that's maybe a little bit more creative that might be a bit more random in response to the next item. We can also do things like change properties like top K and top P, which will give you the flexibility to say, if you want to look at more tokens that come back as a possible response, or if you want to limit it so that it only picks from the top most likely. You can also say that you want to give a penalty to using the same word over and over again. Now, we can access these settings by going to a special page. It's called platform.openai.com. And platform.openai.com will open up a more advanced version of ChatGPT. You can use your same account. Sometimes it does require you to add a credit card to pay on a per token basis to use this more advanced mode. And this more advanced mode here allows you to ask a question: what should I get for lunch? But when I ask that question, I can adjust the temperature to increase the flame or decrease the flame. And I can change some of the settings like top P or the frequency penalty to give a little bit more control in the way that it responds. So you can see that going all the way up in temperature creates a lot of randomness in the response. But going down in the temperature can sometimes remove a little bit of the randomness that you may otherwise get. So it's going to be very focused in the types of responses that you give. And so if you want something that gives you a little bit more flexibility, you can adjust the temperature to give you a little bit more control. All right. Now, understanding all of that about tokens and prompts gives us the ability to then start to look at the idea of agent-based AI. And agent-based AI, in that same way that we can customize ChatGPT by saying who you are or giving it memory, we can do that same thing to create our own version of a custom AI model or a custom version of ChatGPT that has a personality, and giving it information in a customized prompt that describes who it is. We can also take an AI model and we can give it access to information that it may not normally have using a process called RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. Now, this sounds very complicated, but the main goal here is that if you have a agent that you want to, let's say, teach a class or work as an English professor, you can create a personality for what this model is to create an agent, and then you can upload information or additional context or data that you want to make available to this AI model that it can use to refer to this information when it's attempting to answer a question, which will give it the ability to do things that it may not be able to do otherwise, or may not exist inside of its already existing data set, the billions of data is there. For example, maybe you have your own lecture notes that you want to put into a model and then use that AI model that's been powered with your lecture notes to ask it questions that may be specific to the information that you have. So using those ideas that we just talked about, we're going to come here into this platform at OpenAI and go to assistants. And I'm going to create an assistant that I'm going to call Claudette 2. Now, this assistant here that I'm creating has instructions, or an instruction set that allows me to define who and what this assistant is. And I want you to think of this in the same way that you would customize your ChatGPT by telling it who you are and how you want it to respond. This instruction set allows us to do that exact same thing by giving information on how we want this particular assistant to respond. Now, I've done a little work for us already. You take a look here. I've created a block of text about a Bayou oracle who's a fortune teller, and her name is Madame Claudette. She's 47. She's a mystic fortune teller from Louisiana. And in this instruction set here describes information about who she is and how I want her to respond. So by providing this information to this instruction set in the same way that I can customize ChatGPT, I'm telling it who ChatGPT should respond as, the personality, and what I want it to do. I can also tell ChatGPT that I want to give it additional information that ChatGPT might not have. So in the case of Madame Claudette, I've picked up a book on it, or a PDF on an introduction to astrology. I have an example book on birthday stars and numbers, and this is a birthday book that tells you about your horoscope, as well as, I believe, your Chinese horoscope, depending on the day that you're born. And I have some excerpts of information about astrology and horoscopes that I want to then take that data and make it available to ChatGPT to use. So for this assistant named Claudette 2, I'm going to tell it that I want it to be able to search files. And I'm going to go ahead and select the files on my desktop for Claudette, these 3 PDF documents. And I'm going to attach them. If I want, I can adjust some of these more advanced features that we quickly talked about. So I can increase or decrease our temperature, where we know that increasing the flame on the temperature means that we're going to get a bit more randomness in the way that Madame Claudette responds. But by decreasing it, we're going to get much more focused answers. And using this, I'm going to ask it for a horoscope. Now, I don't know if anyone in the chat would like to give me their name and their birthday. See if I can see. I don't know if I can see in the chat. So I guess I'll use myself. So I'm going to say Jason, born November 8th. And so using this information, Madame Claudette is going to answer back, giving me a zodiac answer. And there are also things that I explicitly told her to do, like always end by mentioning my web address in my newsletter. And so she's following the instruction set that I provided her, while also using the information to give me specific things about me being a Scorpio and the date that I'm born. And also she has the ability to tell me other people who were born on that same date. And so you can do all types of implementations of these types of assistants to create them and use them in amazingly interesting ways. Another example of assistant that I created for the American Association of Private Pilots is one called Amelia. And here, Amelia also has an instruction set that says that she's the Chief Marketing Officer of the American Association of Pilots, or Owners and Pilots. I've also provided a series of books here to Amelia about how the AOPA works, such as their advertising book, or what kind of marketing planning information, or what types of ads are available from the AOPA. And so I can ask her, can you make me a marketing plan to sell headphones for pilots? And Amelia will use this information that she has to then come in and provide me with a marketing plan, using all the data, RAG, that's been imported been given to her, but also using the personality that I've defined as that instruction set. Now, this is using some of the developer-friendly version of ChatGPT. But for anyone who's using the client-facing version of ChatGPT, there's also the ability for you to do this exact same thing by creating what's called a GPT. And if you create a GPT, this allows you to create it by providing it with a personality. So you give it an instruction set, you give it a name and a description, and then you can also give it information like books or other data that you want to make available to it. This creates a custom agent or a custom assistant that can then be used to do whatever it is that you want, and that you can also share and make available to other people. All right. Now, what's really cool is that in addition to these text generation features, there's a ton of audio and video features that are also increasingly becoming available that can do amazing things. DALL-E is one of the ones that a lot of us know that OpenAI made available several years ago. But in addition to that, a lot of other companies have come out and created a series of different tools as well. But this has moved from audio, from images into audio, video as well. And now it's incredibly easy to use AI tools to create audio or to create an amazing video clip. So I have two examples here, and we'll see if this works, if you guys can hear the sound coming out of the speakers here. But if you can, this is an example of a tool called Ava, where we provided with a MP3 version of the Taylor Swift song Bad Blood and asked it to imagine a new piece of music in the style of the orchestra.
Jason, I just wanted to say really quickly, unfortunately, we're not able to hear the sound for that. And we are approaching a little bit of our Q&A time. I'm wondering, would our viewers be able to see some of these features featured on your webpage or through your blog, some of these examples?
Yes, they will be able to. So I will skip the music pieces and just jump to some AI generated images, just to give you an idea of some of the things that are possible. And also taking a photo, and I'll move through these very quickly, but this is a human taken photo. But in this case, this video here is an animated version of that photo that's been transformed into video by using some of the tools that are here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This was really, really insightful. I know we had somebody who just wanted to have a comment of just saying they really appreciated the presentation, not only because it's really visually engaging, but also your images have been able to really help contribute to understanding. So I wanted to thank you for that right off the bat. I'm going to go through the questions that I've received in order. The first one has to do with token trees. So does AI build a token tree for each of the tokens when you were discussing that portion? So a little bit more info on how that works.
Sure. So most AI models have what's called a vector database, which is a series of tokens that are categorized in buckets based on context. So when you ask a question, it retrieves the information and returns back a series of tokens based on the things that are most likely to be the response to a message. Those tokens are given a ranking from 0 to 1. You can think of it as 0% to 100% of the thing that's the most likely to be the next thing in the word in a suggestion. And you can then pick from that list, which happens automatically for us, which is the next item. So there is a token tree that is the way that a large language model essentially organizes its data when it's fed information or trained.
Thank you so much. We had a couple questions kind of discussing the ethics and privacy kind of conversation. So we have one from Suzanne. So how do we ensure privacy if we are customizing ChatGPT for different features? Looking at whether, what are the guidelines in terms of giving information to these models? What about materials that are copywritten? And just kind of a general question about that ethical implication with copywritten materials and plagiarism.
Yes. And, you know, this is a question that I don't know if if anyone really knows the answer. One of the music tools that I love and I highly recommend you try out is something called Suno. And Suno allows you to create original music, and I use the word original, from using AI. But there's no question that the model that is used to create this is obviously trained on copyrighted music from other artists. So this for me gets into this question of origination. Anything that's been created by us or any person, including a computer or a tool, comes from something else. It originates from something that already existed. You know, if you learn to play music, you learn to play music by playing someone else's music. What I guess a little bit more complicated is that when you have a technology that can generate something so quickly from other copyrighted content or other sources of content, should that be allowed? But at the same time, if we prevent that, will we see the same power from some of these AI tools that are very much dependent on that? I don't have the answer, but it's definitely an interesting question.
Thank you so much. I'm seeing several questions kind of more particular about the customization features. So using Customize, can you train your model to specific topics? I believe you kind of shared a little bit of that specifically. But there are kind of questions of, you know, when do we use file search versus code interpreter? Kind of your guidelines for how do we make this accessible to students? How would you present this to an audience of students in the higher education setting? And looking one more time, using customization or having customization allow for RAGs to be set. So kind of a little bit more information about that customization and how could it apply in the classroom?
Yes, the thing that I think is great about customization is that most likely, especially as educators, that you probably have information, lecture notes, other things that you can populate into a model that will give it the ability to do some amazing things that are not necessarily publicly available. So those customization features can be incredibly great to just pull or extract more information out of it. There are two features. There's code interpreter and there's file search. File search is, as it sounds, it gives the ability for the model to search through particular files that you provided access to. Code interpreter will allow, in the case of ChatGPT, for it to generate code when necessary to access certain data that may exist in other sources. So it can kind of write its own code to get access to information, which can be incredibly helpful if you're looking to access certain dynamic sources of data. RAG, you know, there's a whole nother piece to RAG that we didn't get into, or retrieval augmented generation. And it's a great mechanism to customize your models by allowing it to search your existing content. But RAG also gives you the ability to access dynamic content. Say, ask a question about the weather or the current score of a game. I don't know if you know this, but one of the things that a lot of people complain about ChatGPT is that they ask the Super Bowl score for the last Super Bowl. The thing is, ChatGPT is trained based on old data. So it's usually somewhere around 3 months old in terms of what it has access to. It doesn't have access to real-time information. And so RAG allows you to pull real-time data like the current weather and populate that information in addition to giving it access to static files. I think that what's really helpful for students is that if they have tons of notes and other information, they can essentially create a chat bot that allows them to talk with the notes and have a personality that can respond back. So if you'd imagine that you've taken 10, 20 pages of handwritten notes, that you scan these things in or use your iPad or something that has that ability, and you pull this into a GPT that you're working with over the time of a semester, this becomes a great study aid, and it becomes a system that you can start to ask, like, have a conversation about things that don't necessarily make sense to you.
Thank you so much. I want to be mindful of time as well, so I'm going to try to look at our questions and come up with like 2 overarching themes of these questions. So there's been a few having to do with what AI doesn't do well. So navigating hallucinations, how do we do beyond text-based? So if we're making graphs or using symbols, not necessarily words and phrases, What are some of the tasks or problems that these AI systems do poorly? What are the things that we should be paying attention to in terms of the issues?
So I'll start with hallucinations. Writing a good prompt is incredibly important. And the majority, like one of the biggest places that you see hallucinations is just not asking or providing enough detail in the question, which means that the model has to make assumptions, right? So I always like the example of where should I go for lunch? And there's so many things that you have to assume. Or should I bring swimming trunks on my vacation? There's so many pieces of that statement that are missing. There's so much context that's not provided. And so the AI model will answer the question every single time, but it's going to have to make assumptions that it doesn't have a way to fill in the gaps. And so the best thing that you can do is to try and be as detailed as you possibly can when you write a prompt. And I think that's the number one thing that you should teach folks. The biggest thing to note is that when it comes to hallucinations, no matter if the answer is impossible, a model will always come back and give you an answer. I have found it helpful to customize my models to say, if you don't know the answer, ask me another question or ask me for details if you need additional information. And I find that can be very helpful to eliminate hallucinations and also to get into the habit of saying, did you understand what I mean? And treating it more like a conversation. In terms of graphs, I've yet to find a tool that's really great at doing graphs, and the image generators are not really great so far at generating text. I know that there's some tools that are starting to get better at it. What you can do, and this is more of an advanced feature with ChatGPT, is you can have it return back structured data, meaning you can ask it a question and tell it to return back that data as, say, points that you can use to do a graph, or to give it to me in a structure that would allow you to create a pie chart. So don't necessarily think about it in terms of give me the chart, but give me the data that I need to generate the chart.
Thank you. I see a question from Meg that I think is going to kind of encompass a little bit of what Lauren and John have been asking as well, bringing it back to that student experience and trying to navigate all of the different information out there. If you could pick the top 2 or 3 concepts of how these tools are constructed that all users should fully know in order how to use these things effectively and ethically, what would they be?
Yes, that's a great question. You know, I think it's incredibly important that students learn to use these models the right way. And so things like writing prompts that are correct, or using an AI model in a way that is I think what's really important. What I found helpful with my own kids is teaching them, is asking them questions that are relatively new, that AI models don't know the answers to and are highly likely to hallucinate on. So if you were to ask ChatGPT a question about yesterday's debate, it's just not going to have that information because it's trained typically with a 3-month gap. And so you're going to get a hallucination most likely. But what's great about that is it changes the way that you're possibly asking or talking to the model. And maybe instead of asking it to give me the answer, it may change you to start thinking about problem solving and ask questions that it can answer, and create a conversation to help you get to whatever it is that you're looking for. So I feel like it's the number one thing is prompt writing, but prompt writing in a way that teaches you to solve a problem by asking questions in a way that can help you get to a result without the result being given to you by an AI model. And that's the true benefit, in my opinion. It's the we call it cobiotics, that human AI interaction. When you're using your own smarts and intelligence in addition to the AI smarts and intelligence to get to a result, then you can get to a result not only quicker, but sometimes you can use it to help figure out gaps within the information that you may have.
Jason, thank you so much for your time today. It was wonderful to learn with you and wonderful to hear from you. If our audience has the reactions ability, we'd love to see any hands or hearts or anything. We got a raised hand. I'm not sure if that, oh, hooray. We're gonna take raised hands as applause. I guess the reactions feature isn't there. But Jason, thank you so much. Can you remind us where we can find you to learn more?
Yes, feel free to check out my website, jasonmperry.com, or you can always email me, jason@jasonmperry.com. Thank you all for listening to me talk for almost an hour on AI. So thank you for having me, and thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen very briefly. I'd like to thank our teams from the University of Baltimore, from UMBC and Johns Hopkins. Thank you so much for getting this session kicked off. Our next session, which is going to feature speaker Mike Kentz. We also do have an exit survey. Both of them can be bit.ly links, so typing bit.ly/AIP. For the exit survey, it'll be --survey. For our next speaker, it's going to be --OC9. So this gives us some good insight on how we can improve for the next time and how we can, hone in on what worked well and really make this a growing, budding series. Any thoughts from our team members from our partner universities?
Thank you, Jason. Very good job. Enjoyed just your style. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Well, thank you all. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you.